Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Mentor podcast. Today I'm joined by Ryan. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Ryan Cochran, and I am a Bitcoin mentor.
Great to have you on the show and thank you for joining. What I really want to try and do is get a good understanding for who you are and the journey that you've been on. So could you wind the clock back, Ryan, and think about some of your biggest passions in, your teenage years? Were you interested in technology or money or any of the things that I'm sure we will touch on later? And yeah, I'd love to learn about you.
Certainly, I would say I am a technology kid from the start. I think it all started probably with a Nintendo way back when those were released. And once you were a little kid back in the day, we didn't have things to play with a lot, so we would just take apart all of our stuff that we had. And so that's how I would get into the electronic side of the house. There wasn't a lot of tech, I guess, growing up early in the 90s besides Nintendo and walkie-talkies. I think that was the stretch of it, but we did what we could. And I guess as far back as I can remember thinking about money, I remember when I was really young, I had asked my parents for some stock certificates for Christmas. They asked me what I wanted, and I had already started I never understood. I still barely understand some things, but on the money side of the house, I could always tell that there was something just weird, or I always had an inclination to like it or something about it. And then so when I started to realize that stocks were broken up pieces of businesses, that started to make sense to me. And I was like, that would be a cool Christmas present, because back then they still mailed you stock certificates from the company. I think they did one year, and it was a Purina company, and they used to make I don't know, who knows what they own now, but I think it was a dog food company back then. That was kind of my first brush. I was always kind of interested in money. My mom is from Ireland as well. And so finally going back there, I went back with her when I was 18. And when you see things priced in different currencies, that's kind of makes you start wondering about life and things. That was one of my first entry points into understanding that. And I could tell that I would ask somebody, how much money do you make here? How much money do you make an hour? Because I couldn't understand why the price of something was different. And when I was trying to convert it in my head, I'm like, well, Levi's are $45 in the States, and they're $110 here, but maybe they're the equivalency of 110 pounds when we were there. So that was kind of my foray into money and currency, basically.
Awesome, Ryan. I love to hear this stuff because as anyone who's listened to me host podcasts in the past, everyone's journey to where we are today is totally unique. And we draw on these different experiences in different ways and ask different questions. And so that's what I always love finding out about. Let's first draw on this idea of like being into tech. And you described pulling apart a Nintendo. Like, what made you do that?
I've always been interested in how things work. I have to know how you're doing what you're doing. If I saw a magic trick, this is a funny anecdote. There was a little magic store around the malls, and one year I went in, and they were showing us the rings trick. They have these brass rings that they cling together and move and pretend like they're connected or not connected. And I was like, I need to learn how that works. Then when the gentleman showed me how it worked, I was like, oh, magic's not real. And so it made me sad, and I never learned how magic tricks work ever again. I don't do that now. I'm like, I'm just going to enjoy the magic. I'll enjoy the sleight of hand while it happens. But I just need to know how things worked. That's one of the ideas when you get into Bitcoin, because you never stop learning. It's very hard to become a master at every piece and section of how Bitcoin works. You can kind of touch and be a jack of all the trades of it, but it's very difficult to be an expert programmer in the core code that's coming out, or understand hardware wallets at whatever level those are at, or blockchain technology, all the above. It's just very difficult. But I've taken my bikes apart, cars, just take things apart and put them back together to just pretty much learn how they work.
Wow. And I must say, from my perspective, that wasn't an instinct of mine, certainly from a technology perspective. Like I never pulled a computer to pieces. Hosting Ben on the show, Ben Perrin, shout out to Ben for founding Bitcoin Mentor. He was talking about how he would buy laptops and kind of repurpose them and clean them up and sell them again. I find that very helpful because I'm not like that. So I need to have a person to reach out to and talk to about why or how things do work in that sense. And so, Ryan, did you find that instinct then followed through to your professional career as you grew up?
Yes, most definitely. Whatever I'm a part of, I always need to understand kind of how it works. I don't know why. I don't know if because I like to only work in just systems, meaning that it's a meritocracy kind of based system so that you're following the same rules that I'm following. I really enjoy that. Part of my journey, I guess we'll get into this, is when I graduated high school, wasn't a whole lot of money in the South at the time. And the military is a very attractive option, especially at that time for younger boys, because it would pay for your college. And I knew at that time that I at least had to have a degree because there wasn't a lot of blue collar jobs that would have paid money in those time frames in the early 90s. That wasn't really a thing that people talked about. It was mainly you need to graduate high school and go to college. So in order to do that, I joined the Air Force National Guard. And part of that process was becoming a satellite communication technician. And when you do that, they teach you all this really cool integrated circuits and stuff like that. You come out with almost a bachelor's in electronics. They teach you down to board level things. So in my head, it was attractive. I'm like, man, this is really great. I'm going to learn a skill set that I can use on the outside of it as I get out, depending on how long I stay in. But that part that carried me kind of through that whole journey and even more into computers as my life grew, because communications is ones and zeros, and where they start and how they get to where they need to go to where they end. It's a very complex, cool process, and there's a lot to learn in that whole thing. So, yes, I did. It was a very attractive to me at that age, I guess is a better way to say it. Yes, being able to put things apart, figuring out how they work, and the system that you're in.
And so, Ryan, you immediately catch my attention talk about the Air Force. So you went to university on a Air Force funded program, and then you worked in the Air Force afterwards. Is that correct?
That is correct. If so, there we have a guard component, a national guard component to the military in the United States, and it's a state situation. So every state has its own national guard. And in
Mhm.
that scenario, if you commit 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year, they would offset your cost to going to in-state universities. And so that was one of the
Oh,
ways a
wow.
lot of people get the chance to go to college in the states.
Okay. And so did you end up actively being involved in the Air Force, or that was just how you managed to get yourself through uni?
So as you start, you start on the low man on the totem pole, which is good too, because everybody needs to learn hard work, and it's not easy out there. So that when you do get a good job, you're excited about it. Um, yes, I took to the Air Force very, very well. I guess maybe I was floating through life as a male, becoming from like ages 14 to 18. My dad got deployed for the first Gulf War that we went to. So he was kind of not in my life in those formative years. And so when you get into the military, they break you down to basically zero. And then the men that you're around, it creates an extreme camaraderie. And on top of that, it's a very meritocracy based organization from level like 0 to 7. You get ahead by doing the things that you're supposed to do and being a good troop worker, whatever the case may be in your team, however that's structured. And so I had a very good team where I was that allowed the National Guard. Actually, I was in an engineering installation unit. What that would mean is I'm trained to be in combat zones, but I can also install those electronics when I'm in those combat zones. And so there's not always an active combat zone where I was, but we were also, I feel a little differently today, but the bases across the world at that time were all upgrading Cat 3 to Cat 5. And so we got these really cool jobs, and I was able to travel. And this brought me into, again, seeing other countries and seeing other positions of people. I was able to travel extensively throughout Europe, Italy, Germany, England, another place in there I can't remember. Then I spent some time in Saudi Arabia for about 30 days over there. So being able to see many different cultures and how those monies pinned together gives me more input as I'm trying to decipher this financial system that everybody's in. So that was happening during that time. But for the most part, yes, we would. And then I was very involved in doing projects, whatever we were doing around the world or whatever bases we were actively on. And then there's also the local component. And then Hurricane Katrina hit, and then we all got deployed to go work Katrina, which was a whole nother experience in your life that you get to see as well. So yes, I was actually to the point. If you're an enlisted guy, after a while, you can decide if there's a space for you, you can be a commissioned officer. And what that is you get to lead troops in that effect. And so I was always wanting to learn how the system works. And because when I do get into position of authority, I want to make sure that I change it for the better when we do arrive there. And I'm thinking to myself, well, the best way I can do that is become an officer, next line up. Then I'll be able to start making decisions as well. Hurricane Katrina hits, and they start to do some things that are really crazy. And I decide that maybe the military is not where I want to be anymore. And that's when I exit. 2006 was my last year in there, and that was the year after Katrina hit. That's where the military stopped for me.
Amazing story, Ryan. Give or take, that was roughly 10 years that you were kind of actively involved.
About 12, yes. A little over a decade.
Yeah, wow. Okay. And I listen to like words like camaraderie, and they come across like very strongly. I'd love to just dive into that a little more. So, now, what are the main things you learn? And you touched on this already around like, the team ethos and the kind of meritocracy and working within the system correctly. What would be some of your takeaways from that if you could delve into that a little more? What were you left feeling after that experience? And we'll get on to this, but of course, you've already said you feel a little different now, so we'll cover that later. But yeah, like, I mean, how did it feel being part of the Air Force in that sense?
It's intoxicating. You are the part I don't like anymore is understanding what our military role plays around the globe. But having said that, you're around your mates, you're around your friends, you party together, you go through very tough, difficult working situations together where everybody's tired, everybody's sweating, but the team keeps you in check and says, "Listen, I know you're tired and I know you're hurt, but we're all going to do this together. We're going to pick each other up and we're going to do it. And listen, if you're not okay right now, I'll pick up your slack. And then when I need it, then you're going to pick up my slack." So you create a bond that you don't even really need to talk about. It's all about the work. It's about getting the mission accomplished and doing it ahead of time better than they wanted it done. And when you finish and do that, and there's five dudes that are doing it, you feel really good. You're like, man, we did that together. There was nothing here. Now there is. We stood it up and we're talking to someplace else that wasn't able to do that before. So being around the males and having that in your life was is it's very it's good and it's bad, right? It's because the bad part is I don't think sometimes it's honest all the way up that tree of hierarchy. But at the same token, I was telling you on the base layer of it, you create brotherhoods that never go away. These people see you at your worst times. They see you at your best times. They mentor you in life because there's an age difference kind of in like how those positions are set up. Obviously, not everybody's going to be 18. So you have some 40-year-olds being the men that they needed when they were younger to answer the questions that they had. And that's how I live my life today. I try to be the man that I needed that was always there to be able to pick up a phone, call me, I'll help you. Maybe you don't know what a 30-year mortgage is or how to buy a house, but I'll give you all the information I have so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. And that's how the only way we as a society move forward. If we constantly let our brothers fall down making terrible mistakes for themselves, how are they going to get ahead to help the world 5 years from now? So just doing a real good job of carrying everybody, just locking arms. Listen, we're not going to let anybody sink today. We all have bad days. We all struggle. We all get depressed. We're going to wake up. We're going to do some push-ups, and then we're going to keep going.
You mentioned the word mission and getting the mission done. So just to kind of help me understand a little more about what it was you were actually doing. So you became highly trained in electronics and satellite systems. So what would a mission have been? I mean, maybe you're not allowed to tell us, I don't know, but just so I can kind of put into perspective what you guys were set to do.
Sure. So it all depends. We were trained in multiple different facets. We weren't really just infantry where we would have one directive. We would install or maintain or configure multiple different types of systems. The Air Force has a lot of comms or military has a lot of comms on vehicles. Maybe they decided a better use for that communication system would be off the vehicle onto a pad somewhere. So now I have to be, and it's really good because the military puts you in positions at a young age to excel. Like some of these kids today, 23 years old, they would not put them in front of colonels on bases to be like, "Excuse me, sir, hi, my name is so and so. I'm here to do this to your base. I want you to understand what I'm doing here, what we plan to accomplish, what it's going to look like when we're done. People, any support services that we'll need, we're here for you." So it would be that we show up, nothing is done, and when we leave, either a milestone for that project was hit above, or I like to be above and better than time, or I'm at the ending stage of it because the project was so big that it stood up and we moved you from something that was antiquated into something that is new and more efficient than what we had in the past. So that, but then, like I said, we had a component to take care of Louisiana. So when Hurricane Katrina hit, now we're putting sandbags down in the bayou. So it all just kind of depends on what you're doing for that day.
And that leads very nicely then to ask you about the experience with Hurricane Katrina. What a stark contrast in mission that you've just highlighted. So what the hell did you have to do for Hurricane Katrina?
So we had been used to being deployed into hurricanes that maybe didn't turn or hit Louisiana or just fizzled out. Actually, 2 weeks before Katrina, another hurricane was about to hit Louisiana, and then the next one. So we had kind of had a party because the hurricane never came. One thing military people do, they'll party. If there's no work to happen, we're definitely gonna have a party. We partied, and at that time we were playing football on PlayStation. So the next weekend, I'm like, well, this hurricane's not going to hit us, so I'll just bring my bare necessities with like one change of clothes, but I'll make sure I have the PlayStation 4 because we all like, or PlayStation 2. I'll make sure we all have the PlayStation, to play to occupy our minds while we're just hurrying up and waiting. That's a big military term. Hurry up and wait. So then that hit and nobody really knew anything. That's when you kind of realize the government doesn't really know what they're doing because it's very difficult to plan for things that you don't know are going to happen. So our base that we were at was actually in Chalmette, Louisiana, and it got flooded the first night. Luckily, we moved out. They shipped us out to a different location so that we could, because the object is going to be that we can help save people after something bad happens, and we can't save people if you are compromised, or because we're going to take more troops away from whatever they're doing to help you. So we all pulled back and then restaged, and then after it hit and it passed through, was you can't really do anything in a hurricane while it's still running because there's tornadoes. It's just not safe. And so right after it stops, then they shift all of us forward to the where it hit in New Orleans, and then we just do whatever we can. Our job at the time was reconstituting communications up to another location from a place in New Orleans. So we were doing that. That's what I was doing at that time. And then we had other people who were cutting people out of houses. And then we had other people who were handing out water. Then we had another hurricane hit 2 weeks after Katrina hit. So they all went up to that location to secure people in that location. So it's a lot of chaos very quickly. The good thing about the military is they give you a lot of leeway to make your own decisions. And so when you got a group of 5 guys together, all of varying different degrees and ages, the younger kids can do the heavier lifting while the older gentlemen produce a plan that can actually be effective and work. Because you don't want to just be spinning your wheels like, dude, we just wasted half a day. For what reason? So they give you a lot of latitude to do that. So when you get to positions, you're like, listen, the main mission is to save people. So let's start there, and then we'll go outward from there to save as much things as we can. So that's kind of how that worked out.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy what one ends up doing in their life. I mean, I created a podcast called Bitcoin with Jake. I did 80 episodes and spoke to people all around the world about Bitcoin. And it was just amazing listening to how many different areas of expertise people had picked up through their lives. And shout out to the guys, Blue Collar Bitcoin. I don't know if you've ever listened to their podcast, but they came on the show and they were talking about being paramedics and basically highly trained emergency specialists. Like you can turn up somewhere and you have no idea what you're walking into and you have to figure it out on the spot. And there are some similarities to what you were just describing there. It's not something I've done with my life by any means, but learning about that experience from people is so fascinating. And Ryan, so you mentioned, I think it was 2006 that this experience came to a close for you. So teach us a bit about what's happened between 2006 and today.
So right about that time, I also met my
Which is
wonderful
20
wife.
years. It's quite a long time.
Yeah. I'm definitely a better man than I was then. So that's nice. Like sometimes you sit down in your little and you don't even think about your future. And now I live in a place where I want to live, and I walk around thinking to myself, man, that little kid was just listening to his radio in his room, and now he's where he wants to be, and the little steps that you take to get there. However, the greatest thing that ever happened to me, met my wife around that same time, around 2005, 2006. And she started taking up the majority of my time. Also, at that, I had been traveling so much with the military. I've always had a propensity to want, I'm an introvert by nature. So I want to be probably alone with my family more often than not. And so I craved this is going to sound so horrible. I craved a slave Fiat job while the military was sending me all around the world. I don't understand why, but I did. I felt like I needed benefits, I guess, at a 401. I have no clue, because that's what they sell. That's what they sold us in the 90s. Like, you got to get out, get a job. You got to go to college, get your degree, get a job. Go out to college, get a degree, get a job. So that's what all the kids were doing at the time. And then I probably felt like I was being left behind because I didn't have, this is true story. This is, now that I can look back, see, now that you learn Bitcoin enough, you can look backwards and lay like that on top of your life. But I just had a high time preference. I wasn't able to plan for the future really well. I wasn't looking that far down the road. I would make all the same mistakes a Fiat person would make these days. You just, what you don't know, you don't know. So graduate college from Louisiana State University. start looking for a job, and then kind of fuddle around and then do networking jobs is where my Fiat lives today. I do back end infrastructure, computer network type stuff. And so basically I've been in that job for about 16 years. And I don't know, a lot has changed, but not a lot has changed. So bought and sold a couple houses, and then we have two children, which takes up a lot of your time if you have kids. Once you have kids, you start to realize you're like, oh, this is a lot of effort and a lot of tasks. So uh, most of that they take up a good bit of that stuff. So a lot of it's really just been fiat, just buying house, okay, let's sell this house and move to a bigger house, let's do this and let's do this. And then I guess the next change would happen during like COVID would be the next sit down I had with myself about where I was going. So crazy. I would tell you probably 10 to 15 years, 10 to 12 years were just being fiat, just waking up, commuting an hour to my job because I thought that's what I needed to do to get ahead. I was going to be the best Cisco guy, the best networking guy, or the best this guy, realizing that, those aren't really the places you want to be. You want to be providing services and empowering other individuals. People would ask me my whole entire life, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I played football when I was little. I was like, oh, American football. I'd love to be a football coach. But what I think that is I like empowering individuals. I like giving people the keys to success themselves and watching them produce that success. It's very intoxicating. I tell people all the time when you teach them Bitcoin stuff, they're like, oh, thank you so much. I'm like, it's a two-way street. I love watching you learn this so that you can walk out of here and protect yourself from the future as well. Because now you know the same things that I do, and you're going to teach somebody else, and you're going to teach somebody else. And the more we teach each other, the less we have to spend time learning, right? So then we get free time to go elsewhere. So yeah, not a whole lot happened other than raising a family in that time period. And if you have children, once you have them, it's doctor's appointments, it's preschool, it's birthday parties, it's so on and so on. But they're 13 and 11 now, so we're kind of out of that stage. On to other things.
Ryan, well played, mate. I just love hearing people's personal journeys. That they're all different, and I can feel the energy. I can feel the vibe coming through when you're talking about empowering people with knowledge and helping coach them. My wife is due with our third in September. So I'm still very small babies with nappies and prams and all that jazz. But I know the vibe. Like when your kids arrive, just everything shifts. Like all the cliche stuff about, oh my gosh, now I understand what the world's all about. You've got these things to look after. Like it's all true. And you have a lot less time. And so, yeah, I mean, lots of stuff in common there. Let's start to really try and draw on the Bitcoin story. It's fun how it weaves in. So you mentioned COVID. That was a big thing for a lot of us. But maybe just wind the clock back kind of 2018, 2019. Were you into Bitcoin at the time? And why was COVID such a big part of that process?
I can wind it back a little bit more to 2008 when I found out who Ron Paul was. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was the first person to introduce me to probably sound money and what sound money produces in a society. So as his campaign was running, I watched a video on YouTube from him, and he laid out what was going to happen in the United States the 10 years after 9/11 happened. And it was all true. And I'm like, how does this man know this? He's reading something that I'm not reading. And like I said, I like to know how things work. And so if he knows how this thing is working and I don't, I need to read, figure out whatever it is he's doing. So that's where my Bitcoin journey starts. There's not Bitcoin at that time, it's gold, because I see that you're printing money. It was only 800 billion at the time or whatever it was. I didn't equate money to human time at that point in my life, but I know you can't just print money and not have something on the other side of it, obviously bogus credit. But the point is I started to realize that day that I watched that video, okay, there's something wrong. I really need to figure this out. And I got into gold. Now, when you get into gold, you start to be brought to multiple different websites that kind of espouse those certain types of, theories. And lo and behold, in about 2012, I stumbled onto Reddit's Bitcoin forum. And that's when I first ran into Bitcoin. I didn't get into it until about the end of 2013. So that was my first taste of it. So I've been riding up and down since then. Then let's say just meandering around the financial world, just 401k, I call it shoveling coal into a furnace. Just every 2 weeks, just tossing 15% into something you don't fully understand. And then COVID hits. Let me rephrase that. The government's response to COVID hits. And me and my wife are sitting at home,
Yeah.
and I'm like, are we truly happy? And I said, if we're not, then we need to change that. I was like, this is the time that we are going to chase happiness and peace above all else. Money, I don't care what it is. And so that's what we did. And we built this nice property on a couple acres in a small part of Louisiana. And I told her I wasn't happy, don't want to live here anymore. She's like, neither am I. So we just up and moved the family to Colorado because we love the state, we love the Rockies. And so we ended up just moving up here.
You touched on it well. Like, you hadn't understood that money's connected to human time, and it's obvious, but not obvious, if that makes any strange sense. So for me, Austrian economics came after Bitcoin. I learned about Bitcoin coming at it from an investment perspective and looking for capital growth and capital protection. And then I asked the question, well, what is money? And I'm someone that was like highly trained at university level to run and manage businesses and make money, but never said, well, hang on, what is money? And much like yourself, you talked about being the best CISCO guy, or, that mentality of like, right, get into the workforce. And I was a broker and I was going to be the best broker I can be in this market. And a number of years in, and you're like, well, I'm not actually going anywhere here. And it's exhausting. This doesn't make sense. What the hell's going on? It's a big moment when you go, hang on, what is money? And Ron Paul's done an incredible job bringing that to a wider audience. When you came across the Reddit group, did you go, oh, this is just sound money, but digital? Or did it take a little longer to kind of figure out the kind of combination?
I think because I still viewed it in the fiat lens. It wasn't until GameStop that I actually crossed what I would tell people cross the chasm to where you don't really even care about dollars anymore. It takes a long time to get to a point where you don't care about the dollar. In the beginning, I was going to try to get rich quick scheme. When I started, there was Litecoin, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. And still in my head, Bitcoin would be gold, Litecoin would be silver, and I didn't know what Ethereum was, and I still don't know. But then all of the other coins started to carry on. So I didn't grasp, I think maybe towards the end of 2018, 19, I started to realize it was a different asset class. I cared about it way more. But I will tell you that the moment everything switched on for me was when they stopped the GameStop trade when retail was going to beat them. And I was like, okay, it's all, I didn't really understand the level of total control until that happened. And I was like, oh, they can just do whatever they want whenever they want. So they're not going to ever let you win. And then in the same series of events, I think they blew out the nickel trade in some other country and did the same thing. They're like, okay, we'll just stop. We'll just stop the market. And then when it comes back, we'll let you trade again. And I'm like, what is all this? I thought you were playing by the same rules that we were. And I don't play well in games that we're not all playing by the same rules by. So to answer your question, no, I did not. I didn't see it.
Okay. And you mentioned GameStop. I mean, fascinating story. But even in more recent times, to see the Japanese stock market down by 12% in a 12-hour trading range, and then another 12 to 24 hours later, it's just come back to where it was before. It's like, well, what the fuck just happened there? And someone somewhere has just made a shitload of money knowing that that might or might not happen. Now, I'm no expert in that particular scenario, but that's an unusual market iteration. Like, why did that happen? And who knew it might happen? And who's benefited from it? And I come back to this word. I had it start from earlier, meritocracy. It's massive, right? If you don't understand that the fiat system that we've been conditioned to live and work within is not a meritocracy, then what are you doing? You know what I mean? You have to ask that question. And why these conversations are so valuable is every single one of us has had to go through this process. And it's kind of like an unlearning system. It's like you have to forget what you were told was correct. But we've all been through it. And that's why being a mentor is cool, because we can help other people do the same thing. And it's really all about asking questions. And so to draw on that meritocracy point, why is Bitcoin a meritocracy? And I think you've highlighted well, why the existing status quo world is not, in terms of how GameStop was treated, for example. But just talk me through what appeals to you about Bitcoin from a meritocracy perspective.
We live in a world where weak males get to make decisions for the rest of us, and I don't like being told what to do, and I don't like people making decisions for me. In the fiat money printer system, those people get to rule over us, and I don't like that. And when I first ran into Bitcoin, I understood that you have to follow the same rules that I do. That's when I really got hooked. When I really learned that you can't, not speaking of you, but anybody can't change it without the consensus of everybody else that's playing the game. And so that gives us all equal footing, no matter who we were born to, where we live, where we grew up, what school we went to, or who we pay, or who we steal from. It doesn't matter. You follow the same rules I do. And that it's F you money. And that's really the best part about it is telling, I guess I get so passionate about being told what to do is because I believe we're all struggling to do the right thing and it's hard. And for other people to steal time and take from others, you're just hurting their progress. And it frustrates me when people can't see that the money is what's causing this to you. And so when we give them that answer and give it to them and empowers them, that's the good part to it. Let's see if I can make an analogy with myself wanting to be the best Cisco guy. There's no future in being the best Cisco guy. You may feel good for that one point in time where you knew six more things than the guy next to you did. But the reason you're doing that is because you're chasing money. And the next level of the best Cisco guy, you believe in your head, is going to do that, as opposed to taking care of your body, your mind, your soul. There's so many more important things inside of you that will make you a better person on a day-to-day basis, other than being just that best person. So think about the things that maybe in your life you chase for the money aspect of it, but maybe that's not the real goal. And so all of the fake money brings all these fake goals in front of humans. And it's so hard to discern the difference between them. The craziest thing to me is how appliances keep changing colors over time and they keep going back to the same colors like that we had in the 60s. And I'm like, we just need one good refrigerator. And air travel's horrible. It never was this bad. I was promised flying cars, and I'm like, flying in a plane is terrible. I'd rather just drive. So the meritocracy portion of it is we're all following in the same path. The fiat money creates fake goals and fake systems and obfuscating things that can bring you real peace, real joy, and real happiness in your life. Helping another person learn a skill is invaluable. It's intoxicating to you. It's intoxicating to them. They love you now because you helped them, and you create just this relationship. And that's really what we're here for. If we're not here for each other are humans, what are we doing? Like we have to be here for each other, because if not, there's nothing else here. It's just water, mountains, air, and the animals. If we're here, then we all need to be helping each other in our growth to go forward. We've just been lied to for so long. It's very hard to pull the curtain up and see that people who are telling you about Bitcoin really just want to help you. They just want to show you that the system that you're in is not real. Look at this real system based on merit, based on code, law, that a man can't just decide to change it at will whenever he wants.
I really love that phrase. It's a system of rules, not rulers, which is the complete opposite of what the fiat system is, which is it's a system ruled by rulers. The guys that are closest to the money printer or control the money printer essentially control the law, and they can do whatever they want whenever they want, because it's a system in which money talks. And if you can print it faster than anyone else, then you've got more than anyone else. And the amount of money that's spilling around, we've completely lost touch. Like, if I think today, if I hired someone to come and help with my kids here in Australia, I might pay them $50 per hour, right? But the amount of debt that a government has been able to print and accumulate on its own balance sheet is in the trillions. And it's just like the purchasing power. It's completely lost all sense of reality. What is $1 trillion? Like, what does that buy you? It's absolutely mad. And you have to call bullshit, right? This doesn't work for me. And so you go, okay, well, what might work is a system of rules, not rulers. And then you have this process of Bitcoin being an opt-in or opt-out system. You don't have to join. You can carry on doing what you're doing. But go and have a look at the people that did choose to opt in. How are their lives? How do they feel? Do they feel better? Have they had time to think about their spirituality, their own health, their own families? Yes. And that's why when you go to these Bitcoin events, you're like, who are all these complete psychos that are actually like enjoying themselves? Because they feel more powerful, they feel stronger, they are wealthier, and they're more excited about the future. And that's gold dust, right? I can feel it now. You and I on this call, we're like, yes, thank God we found this thing. It feels incredible. And I'd love to ask Ryan, like the decision to move from Louisiana up to Colorado with your young family, big deal. Was it easier because of Bitcoin, do you think?
Oh, this is a loaded question, but yes, it is. It was easier because I'd been in Bitcoin long enough to see some appreciable gains. That gives you a different perspective on the world. That's why we want to give Bitcoin to people is listen, this is going to change the way you view everything. You just got to start in the beginning. So yes, it would have been way more difficult had I just been trying to be the regular dude I was trying to be before. But Bitcoin has taught me to sacrifice whatever for happiness and peace within my family. My wife is probably not the most important person in my life because I'm going to be with her the longest. And men need to understand that you're going to be with your wife for probably 60 years. So creating that team environment with her to move the children and to move the family made everything about us stronger. It taught you that you need to be more patient because she needs your help just as much as I need her help. We're doing this together. We don't have huge extended families, so we just kind of got in a U-Haul and went. So yeah, it's hard, but what it does just with everything hard in life, it gives you confidence to do things again. And nothing will be as hard as what? Nothing will be as hard as stacking sandbags in the heat in Louisiana on a bayou that your dough is going to flood in 12 feet in a couple hours, right? Just total useless work. So keep doing hard things that you can take yourself out of, like take apart a Nintendo, but don't break it, right? Keep doing hard things and life gets a little bit easier. Or when stuff does get hard, you can just shake it off a little easier.
Awesome. Yeah, those are some great kind of almost kind of attitudes to life that I could even draw from, for sure. Thank you for sharing, Ryan. I've learned so much from you. We must talk about Bitcoin Mentor and what the process has been like for yourself becoming a mentor. So we'll start there. How did you hear about Bitcoin Mentor and what was the process like becoming one yourself?
Since I've been in Bitcoin so long and I was a computer guy, basically, I was trying to take my computer skills and lay them into a Bitcoin job. And I interviewed with multiple Bitcoin companies for positions as such. And when you don't get one of those, it's very difficult to wake up the next day and go back to work because you thought you were going to be transitioning your life into something else. So that wasn't happening. Bitcoin companies start to fall. Things are not doing real great. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to relax for a little while, pour myself into the things I have in my life right now. And if a Bitcoin opportunity shows up, I'm going to just pounce on it. I'm going to make myself more available in the Bitcoin community so that if opportunities do arise, I will be there to jump in on them. I saw this post happen on one of the Bitcoin message bases, and they were like, do you like to teach people about Bitcoin? Do you like talking to people about Bitcoin? Do you know about hardware wallets? Do you know about certain things? And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And then we go interview. So I get past the first like kind of step, and they're sending out these videos, and I'm emailing Ben on the side. I'm hitting Ben up on Twitter on the side. I'm like, Ben, you got some dude over here using your videos. Do you know who these people are? Because I didn't know Ben was affiliated with them to start. So I go through with Mike and Ben, and we go through our meetings, and it's just wonderful. And it is exactly the opportunity that I needed because what I really care about in Bitcoin is teaching people the idea of sound money and by proxy, the money system that you're in. This way, I get to talk to people about Bitcoin all the time and help them set up nodes and set up wallets and answer their questions. And they are so appreciative. A lot of them will say, "Listen, I should know these questions." I'm like, nobody should know any of this stuff. It's extremely difficult for computer people, for finance people. It's just hard because you're not just trying to learn a technology. You're trying to uninstall the fiat application that you run, and it's difficult. So that's how it started off. Got through a couple of interviews, couldn't believe that it was happening, and then the next thing you know, I've watched I don't know how many hours of Ben, and then you're in meetings with him. So it's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience, and I've got to. I don't want to say orange pill, but if you know Bitcoin and talk about Bitcoin to people, it's adversarial at minimum. And so these people come to you already and want to talk about Bitcoin. So I'm just like, I just let these meetings go long. I could just talk about Bitcoin with you forever because it's very difficult to find individuals that want to discuss it. It's been one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life.
Awesome. And it's funny, it is difficult to find people to talk about Bitcoin with from a kind of physical perspective. You know, where I am now in Byron Bay in Australia, it's like how many people in this little beach town will want to talk to me about, you know, Ron Paul and all this jazz. It's rare, but this is where the you know, cyberspace really comes into action. There are people out there looking for this information. You only have to see the popularity of some of the podcasts and how many views these episodes and stuff get online. Like people are interested to find out. And I think there's that moment where you suddenly it flicks a switch. You're like, hang on a second, maybe this is the solution I've been looking for this whole time. And I mean, for me, Bitcoin boils down to describing it as savings technology. It's like, oh, Well, yeah, that's true. I don't actually want to buy a government bond. I don't really want to buy a company. I just want to be able to store my stuff over time. That would be great, please. And it's actually pretty basic. But like you touched on at the very start of the call, it's like it's the infinite rabbit hole. You cannot know everything about Bitcoin, even if you wanted to. And so, yes, being able to meet people where they're at with their problems is really cool. And how's your experience been actually coaching people? Have you done some sessions?
Yeah, I've done a couple of sessions. My most rewarding ones are getting people air gapped behind their own node. So I've got to do three of those where people are standing up start nine servers and then fresh off of cold cards and going air gapped, coming off a ledger or coming off another device. And then when you show them how to send money to an air gapped device, it just blows their mind. But that really is what gets you into Bitcoin. You start to understand that the power of this thing being offline and you just sent value to it. How is that possible? How did you just send value to Karachi on a Sunday? Like, I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense. You're like, it doesn't. It's, it takes a lot of learning and understanding to actually what is going on. But when you give them those tools and let them interact with the base chain, I really think it changes. They're not just buying an ETF. They're not just DCA and $20 here or there. They actually stood up a node, connected Electrum to Sparrow, set up a wallet, backed it up, talk to me about different ways to secure things. There's this security model and this security model. I would do this if this was this, and this is the way I would set it up if it was this way. Just just basically give myself to them. This is what I have. You're getting everything I've ever learned since 2013. And if you have another question, I can probably answer some of that, or I definitely know somebody who could find the answer to it. So just giving them everything that I've learned so they can come up to speed even faster and don't have to waste a decade like I did, where we would all just, instead of buying, PlayStation 2, who knows what I could have bought and I'd be retired by now. But that's not the point. Helping others is the point.
And Ryan, so just to highlight, you touched on a couple of technical names and brands. So if I was to air gap, what does that mean?
So if you interact with a Ledger wallet, you use Ledger Live, you are actually utilizing their servers. And so when you broadcast your transactions, they can see what you're doing. If you take that node and put it behind your internet, we put it behind the Tor network, and then that node lives in your house on your wireless or wherever your network. And then when you broadcast a transaction, it just goes to your node and then out to the network. So it really locks down our privacy. And if we air gap that transaction, people can't just compromise the device that you have Sparrow or your wallet running on and send money. They would need the device to do that. So it's like I'm going to get my coins off of an exchange. Okay, well, there's multiple different levels to secure those coins once you get them off the exchange. How do you feel? What's your comfortability level? Let me explain these three ways that we could set this up, and then pick which one you think you would be most successful at. We bring that infrastructure off of the internet and into your home so you can be your own bank.
And what I was really trying to get at there is like someone like yourself, Ryan, deep expertise. And that's what you buy. And so you turn up and you pay for an hour or you pay for a package, whatever the case might be. You are shortcutting a decade of trial and error in a few short hours. Thank you so much for taking us through all those awesome parts of your life and explaining your learnings, essentially. It's been fantastic to hear. Thank you. The last question I have is just, if people want to reach out and get in touch with you, Ryan, what's the best way to do that?
On Bitcoin Mentors page, you can funnel through to my site, or follow me on Twitter at Fiat Mentor Ryan. I like to mentor people about the evil fiat machine. So that's my goal in life.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Ryan.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you.